Morning, everybody. It's the 4th of August. We are Signal Centre Talking Ball. I'm Joe Neighbour and I'm joined by Steve O'Hare. Morning, Steve.
Morning.
How you doing?
All right, mate. You got
Good.
our youngest ever medalist today, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sky.
Sky. She
Yeah.
13 years old. She wasn't the youngest medalist though. The silver medalist was 12
Oh, right.
from
The youngest
China.
British medalist.
Yeah. Still, yeah, fantastic. The feel good factor and the excitement around the Olympics still very much ongoing. We've got the cycling going on now. We've got another sailing gold this morning, so yeah, all good.
Is there a bit of a dispute over that, though, I think?
What's that? Cycling?
The sailing gold.
Yes, but I don't think they can do anything about it. I think it's the
All
French
right.
keeping up.
Oh, hello. Hello. There they go again.
Yeah. Okay, so onto the news. Vaccines targeting the highly transmissible Delta variant may now be needed. That's according to the latest research. A third wave of English cases has been driven by the Delta strain among both unvaccinated people and vaccinated people, especially those aged 12 to 24, as I've certainly seen in my household, as well as some people who have as Ed mentioned, received the COVID shot. So the effectiveness of the vaccine is obviously a concern, and that will be felt everywhere, I would have thought. I think in Israel and the UK, they're now starting to talk about issuing out these third shots. So we'll see what happens there. Less than a week after the Israeli-linked tanker was targeted in a suspected drone attack, that Israel, US, and UK have blamed on Iran, the British maritime officials have announced a potential hijack situation also in the Gulf of Oman. So that's ongoing at the moment. So a few bits and pieces going on in the news, but in terms of what's actually impacting markets, pretty quiet session yesterday. Obviously, there are a little bit concerns over the coronavirus situation. In terms of earnings, we've got a few big names out today. Obviously, we saw this thing from China yesterday taking aim at some of the computer game companies. That seems to have eased a bit and they're all higher overnight. Not much on the old calendar yesterday. Overnight, we did see New Zealand beat on both employment change and unemployment rate. And we saw the Chinese CAC services PMI with a sharp increase moving to 54.9. From the previous reading of 50.3. So we have a bit of data out today ahead of the non-farm payrolls on Friday. But Steve, let's get stuck into the charts. Certainly from an FX side of things, there's not a massive amount to talk about. It was quite muted yesterday. What was the situation with the markets you look at?
Well, I suppose if I dive into commodities first, especially with the sort of backdrop we've got obviously the Delta variant taking hold globally, and there's concerns obviously from an energy perspective whether that will have an impact on demand. But on the flip side, you've got the geopolitical tension kicking off with the oil tankers as well. So it's a bit of a two-way price action. I'm still sort of undecided as to whether we're in the fifth and final wave or this is the third wave. So basically, was this the third wave back here? And is this the fifth wave? And now we're getting the correction. It sort of feels like it now. So redrawing this, it could be that it could be basically we're in a usual correction you get at the end of an impulsive five-wave move. So jury's still out on it though. So let's take a look at that on a daily basis. We can see we formed a bit of an evening star formation here. And we've extended lower yesterday. Price action a bit muted today, a little bit higher, but on a sort of fragile footing. And I think I did gun-to-head gun-to-head trade yesterday, looking for this reaction off the previous swing low, but I highlighted this bearish flag and the bearish flag actually played out, so a bit peeved about that. But yeah, hit the measured move target 68.84 and it's bounced quite significantly, bounced $1.50 from there. On the Brent crude side of things, similar sort of price action, but obviously we've got it trades at a premium to the WTI crude oil of about just over $2. That reacted higher after the initial sell-off, 71.10 support coming in there. Gold side of things still seems to be sort of drifting sideways. We've got a potential double top formation, the neckline at 1790. For me, that's the line in the sand. If we get a break below there and a close below there on a significant time frame, then I expect the move down to 1750, potentially 1680. But it's holding on for dear life at the moment. 1805 is the overnight support, and prices reacting slightly higher from there. We've got the Ichimoku cloud moving a bit sideways, so could potentially break, but again, the tensions that are building up could sort of like lend a hand to gold on that front. I'll take a look at cryptos actually, because Bitcoin has basically broken through the resistance we were talking about and has poked its head above and got shot down quite significantly, and continues to sort of like lose ground. We've broken through the support we saw at 38,335 and continued lower. And although we're in the Ichimoku cloud, so there's a bit of support there, really the next level of support comes in at 36,400 on Bitcoin. So that's the level to watch. On the indice front, we can take a look at, the US, straight away I look at the US and I think 35,000 hanging around the big figure. We're still getting these attempts to move higher, which are blocked, and so it remains in this restricted area of resistance, coming in around about the 35,000 level. So levels below, we had the spike lower. This was yesterday. We had a really decent spike lower, quite close to the open, but the reaction higher was just as aggressive, and within an hour or so, that spike was wiped out. Decent support from this cloud here, and obviously you've got the horizontal levels around about 34,650 and 34,750. Nasdaq again hanging around the significant highs. 35,000 is the 15,000 is the sort of like real level to watch here. But we seem to be at interim resistance at 15,090, and above that we've got the all-time high at 15,142. Again, you saw the spike down yesterday, and then the continuation higher. So as Joe said, a little bit more of a recovery on that tech side of things. S&P hanging around the 4,400 level. Again, you've had the attempts to move higher that have failed so far. Really, I suppose, have to look at the longer term chart. Let's have a look at what the weekly chart shows. We've got this trend line. Let's redraw it. Takes in a couple of significant points here and here. So still in that upward trend on a weekly basis. Price action last week was indecisive, doji. Potentially the week before, hanging man candle, maybe. If we look at the MACD, it's in negative territory, and momentum is moving lower while prices move higher. So we have got bearish divergence. Yeah, but don't know what to say about that. The China 50 still under a bit of pressure, has recovered from the swing low last week, but hasn't made any significant inroads into last week's range. So still under a bit of pressure on the China front. The Nikkei is not going to show us what it's doing. We'll look at the Hang Seng, again, similar sort of price action to China 50. The Nikkei in this descending triangle formation, which last week engulfed the previous week's formation, so negative on that side of things. A break below 27,133 and a close below there on a weekly basis would be significantly bearish. That's it, Joe.
This one, Steve, thank you. So FX side of things, dollar index yesterday pretty indecisive. It seems to have found some support at this 38.2% fib level at 91.79, and as you can see, the last 2 days very much doji-like on the candles. Bit of weakness today, but while we're above this level, I would expect there to be some support. If this level breaks on a closing basis, then I'd be looking for a continuation lower towards sort of 91.43 to 91.36, but I don't envisage any sort of massive moves on that. Maybe we we've got some data today which may impact it. We've got obviously the ADP employment results, which are generally the precursor to the non-farm payrolls on Friday, and we've also got ISM non-manufacturing at 3 p.m. So potential for some movement, but clearly the participants look a bit undecided at the moment, and there's no sort of clear direction as to where that's going to head. Looking at euro dollar on the flip side of that, again, a bit of indecision over the last couple of days. For me, it is still looking quite bearish overall, but in the short term, a higher correction cannot be ruled out, certainly up to this kind of level up here at 1948. Volumes dipped a little bit. There was a bit of a poke higher on the upside on the break of this sort of wedge, but volumes haven't been supportive since then. They've died off a little bit, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. In terms of where the volatility is and where we are seeing some significant moves, it's actually in the Aussie currencies and the New Zealand currencies, so more commodity based and riskier assets, you would say. Aussie CAD over the last 3 days has put on some decent gains, as you can see here. Not really anything supportive on the volume, but we did post this bullish outside candle on the 2nd, and prices have continued to push higher. I've got resistance here at 93.14, which is kind of in line with this downtrend channel. So maybe we'll see if there's a reaction in and around that level. We have seen spikes previously outside of the channel, but they were closed back within the channel, and lower prices then were seen. So we'll see if we, potentially looking for a repeat of that. Aussie yen seems to have found some support over the last couple of days. Strong move higher today. There are a lot of resistances above to potentially overcome before we can start thinking about a turnaround in this, but for now it looks to be just really corrective. Aussie dollar looks quite interesting. We've broken above some resistance here at 74.00. Pushing higher, obviously a few hours to go before we close off this candle, so we'll have to wait and see if the strength can be held on to throughout the trading session, but looks as though there could be a corrective move to the upside there as well. Looking at the New Zealand currencies, this is the biggest mover of the session. Some of these currencies up by nearly 1% or above 1%. New Zealand dollar CAD, 2 massive days of increase. Again, probably looks corrective, but you could argue maybe a bottom is forming here. Some resistance levels to encounter a bit higher up, around about 89.25. On New Zealand dollar versus the Swiss franc, trading in a bearish channel, but been some big moves higher from the lower end of that. Comes into some resistance at around about 64.65, so it looks like the correction higher has potentially got a bit more in it to the upside. New Zealand dollar, US dollar looks quite interesting as well. Been kind of waiting for a top pattern to complete here. We got a few false signals around this level here on the break of support at 69.43. Bit of a mess really, but we have seen a continuation higher to the upside. Got some resistance at 71.20. So not sure what that's going to do. I think overall I do favour it to head lower. So potentially looking at fading that this morning, and I'll come on to that on my gun to the head trade in a moment or so. So that's pretty much it on the FX side of things. Let's have a look at the gun to the head trades yesterday. Steve, you mentioned you were stopped on oil. You sort of offered 2 opinions on that yesterday, and unfortunately took the
wrong one.
The wrong one. This is the way it goes. So stop out there on oil, and I was 15 ticks offside on Aussie CAD or 0.54R. So not a stop out, but certainly not a win. So need to get again back on this horse after a bit of a stinker over the last few trading sessions. So anything that's caught your fancy this morning, Steve?
I'd like to
Or do you
say
want me
no.
to go?
Yeah, if you've got something in mind, then I'd rather you went.
Well, I was just looking at this New Zealand dollar, US dollar. Yes, volumes have picked up a little bit in recent sessions, and obviously we've seen a continuation higher based on the fact that we saw this unemployment data improve overnight in New Zealand. I do still believe that the outlook for the dollar index is improving, so I would be looking to fade into any sort of bouts of strength that we see here from the New Zealand dollar versus the US dollar. And looking at the intraday charts, this is the hourly chart. Let me just make that 4 hours so it's easier to read. But there was a swing high posted back here on the 6th of July, and we've rallied into a 88.6% fib level. Not the most well used Fibonacci level, but for me, it's kind of like the last throw of the dice. If these fib levels are going to work, then it needs to happen right now, right here. So for me, I'm going to sell it at this level. It's currently at 70.81. I'm going to place a stop loss above this swing high, and I'm going to look for a reversal down towards 69.80. So from a risk reward perspective, it'd actually be slightly better than that because the entry is a bit better. I don't know, 3.5 to 1 looking for on New Zealand dollar, US dollar.
Okay, mate. I think I'm going to stick with oil today, but I am going to flip and go short of it. The reaction high over the last 8 hours is pretty good, but it's going to find some resistance, especially around the sort of like the 70.38 area, possibly 70.50. So this last hour we're running it into here. We're above the Ichimoku cloud on here, but it's a very weak looking cloud. And I'd be happy to fade this. Now, the thing that could potentially go wrong is an escalation on the in this sort of like Middle East area. So
we've also got inventories at 3:30
yeah,
today.
Inventories. So I don't know. With the escalation in the Middle East, I'm sort of thinking we should be higher. Just feels like it hasn't really taken into account. So is there more sort of bad news to come from the inventory side of things, or good news like that we got loads of stock? Prices shouldn't be this high. That's the sort of like more of the angle I'm looking at. So getting short at 70.33. Really sort of like targeting maybe a move back down to that swing low coming in at 68.83. So I'll have a 50 tick stop on this. 70.83 must stop. So that's what I'm doing. I'm getting short of that and hoping that resistance holds here.
Okay. Cool. So as we mentioned, in terms of data today, we do have a few bits out. First up, 1:15 UK time, US ADP employment report, 692,000 jobs created in the previous reading. So looking for something above that number, ideally, for a positive take on jobs being created. Obviously, that is generally seen as a precursor to the non-farm payroll numbers, which is due out on Friday at 3 p.m. We have the US ISM non-manufacturing PMI data. The index is expected to rise to 30.2. So that will be keenly watched come 3 p.m. today. And then at 3:30, as we mentioned, we have the US EIA crude inventory numbers. The previous inventories figure came in at minus 4.1 million. So keep an eye on crude prices at 3:30 and also some of these commodity currencies, particularly the Canadian dollar, around the same time for some potential bouts of volatility. Okay, Steve, I think that's pretty much it from us today. We can wrap this up within 20 minutes, which would be quite good. Unless you've got anything else to add?
No, that's pretty much be done, mate. Cheers.
Cool. All right. Well, guys, have a fantastic day. Trade safe, and we'll be back tomorrow morning.
Cheers.